Burn Me Twice is a puzzly, exploration-y game where you play as a witch named Abigail von Rattenhartz, who's been captured by the guards of the city of Duestenberg. It's a game made in Unity Engine by students at the University of Technology, Arts and Design in Madrid, under the name Null Reference Studios. You can tell just by the names of the creators in the credits that it's a Spanish game, and from the looks of it, it's a team of 9 people that made it, with some names cropping up a few times. It runs you through an intro sequence, familiarising you with the low poly graphics before giving you the main menu. It's simple stuff with a start, continue, settings for the music, effects and language, and the credits. The game opens up with a mysterious meeting and a nice detail of the initials on a tombstone to introduce you to the story. Initially, the text scrolls of its own accord, so you just get to watch the cutscene. Within the text, some words are highlighted, which I did think were hints to remember at the time, and that's sort of true through the game, but it's more just used for emphasis on certain things. After that, you enter a court scene where you meet your own character, who pulls an ultra-noob move by accusing a trusted member of the community of bringing on the plague that's racking everyone, without a single piece of evidence other than her own hat. As a result, the villagers, who hate witches since witchcraft brought the plague here before, decide to burn her. Not sure what else she expected, but this part effectively works like a court case intro, teaching you the lesson that if you fail to provide evidence 3 times, you run out of hearts and lose the trial. Losing the trial plays into the story this time, so it does hold purpose, and it's kind of a Phoenix Wright style thing where you have to find items of evidence to put toward your accusation. You end up in the afterlife, or kind of almost there, before a demon called Malab speaks to you and offers you the chance to try again. There are options to say no to this, but you don't have a choice, and he says he wants to watch what you do as your shadow in exchange for bringing you back to before the original trial to let you actually look properly at what happened. It turns out you were actually asked by the town's inquisitors to look into who caused the plague before the trial that you already got shown, since being a witch makes you immune to the plague. And they would burn you at the stake if you refused, which just highlights even more the complete lack of effort you must have put toward it the first time, considering the amount of things you can look at and people you can talk to before doing the trial again. It's effectively an investigation and exploration game, where you go around the areas looking for 4 clues that you can put forward as evidence during the trial. I didn't spot it the first time because I was writing notes, but the game recommends a controller, even though it's playable fine on keyboard and mouse. The switch is smooth though if you put a controller in afterward, and I can only see one potential point where it might be an issue trying to play keyboard and mouse, but otherwise since it's mostly just running around and interacting with stuff, it doesn't affect much. For mouse and keyboard, it's WASD or the arrow keys to move, E or enter to interact, tab for your inventory, and F to pay respects by jumping into the realm of the dead. For controller, it's left stick, A to interact, RB to jump realm, and select for your inventory. The game is very narrative heavy, and to be honest, you realise once you've played it through once that you actually can skip talking to a vast majority of the people in the game. You only need 4 clues, and there are only 4 things you need to do to get them, so every other NPC in the game can be completely ignored if you like. As can the blue spots that encourage you to check them out. In fact, I don't think a single one of these highlighted spots had anything to do with figuring out solutions for any part of the game. Speaking of the realm jumping power, it turns out that every witch has a specific power that comes with it a specific curse. Your witch is the Witch of the Abyss, who can bridge life and death so you can solve your mysteries by speaking to both the living and the dead. There are things you can interact with on both planes, but NPCs are only visible normally and spirits are only visible in the spirit realm. The spirits are overseen by the Saint, a woman called Geraldine who tells you how to jump realms, and that's pretty much all she does to take part. You can also access some areas in the spirit realm that are barred off in the real world, and your little moon on your hat glows when you get near something in the spirit world, so you can switch and see what it is. Or that's supposed to be how it works. I'm pretty sure I got to a point where my hat moon was just pulsing on and off even though I wasn't near anything of note. By speaking to everyone and everything, you reveal that there's a fair amount of lore, and you get background information to various characters, the town's relation to its neighbouring city where you're from, and some of its history. It's a classic Salem witch trials kind of town, which holds no bars on using the gallows to deal with criminals. And given the plague going on, it means there are plenty of dead people to talk to. There's only really one puzzle in the first segment, which is as simple as there is a place to put a thing and there is only one interactable thing in this entire area, so I guess they go together. The game doesn't let you start the trial until you have all the evidence needed, then you can begin, and as I said, it's almost like Phoenix Wright, where you have to provide evidence to show something, and you click on it. If it's right, hooray. If it's wrong, you lose a life. If you fail the trial, you just get to restart from the start. It's not all that difficult, and from talking to everyone you have a bit more context behind your clues, but if you just go directly for all the clues and don't speak to most of the people, your character still provides the context during the cutscene anyway. I thought that might be it, but there was a mystery plot unfolding that wasn't fully resolved by accusing the person that the first cutscene already told you it was, and more than one conspirator was involved in the process, as was seen from the intro, so it entered a second segment where you have to find out who killed a guy. People suspect it may be a witch given all the plague summoning going on, so they use that as an excuse to get you to figure it out instead of burning you at the stake like they usually do. Also, there's a glaringly obvious telegraph to this woman who knows who you are before you even meet her. Suspicious much? The second segment is a bit more open and a bit more complicated, though completing it is really just a matter of checking out everything and everywhere, since I got stuck a bit, but just because I didn't notice something. There are 2 day cycles in this portion, or night cycles I should say, since it's lore that it's always night in this town. But there are just 2 stages of night that they use to measure time, and you can choose to sleep to skip into the next one. This will change which NPCs are around, where they are, and what places you can access. If you needed to do something in the first cycle and don't and enter the second, if you try to sleep again or run the trial without having what you need, you'll get kicked back to the start with all your items thus far to give it another go. There are a couple more puzzles in this bit in that sense, a couple of stealth segments in a house and items you need to find and use at certain points to get you where you need to go, which did take a bit of thinking. There's another layer too this time in that you not only find evidence, but you have to clarify what the evidence is before you could use it in a trial, so just because you have it in your inventory doesn't mean it works. On running the second trial and completing it, you enter into the final segment, where the conspiracy you as the player know is happening due to cutscenes actually gets revealed to your character, and you have to go and stop the obviously suspicious woman from ruining the whole town with her ulterior motive plan. This part of the game has complaints on the Steam page about being buggy, but I had no problems with it functionally at all. This is the part that you might struggle on mouse and keyboard with. It's a short combat segment where you have to fight skeletons that spawn in the town to get to your opponent. They trap you in an area and you press LT to aim, which locks you stationary, and then RT to fire a beam that can get rid of as many skeletons as are in its range. The skeletons one-hit KO you, so you have to position yourself right. It also gives you a chargeable area of effect attack, but it does take a while to charge, and so I only really used it a couple of times since the skellies would just catch me whilst I was charging, considering I also had to be stationary when I was doing that. The final boss is a little anticlimactic, but also kind of funny. It does go for a sympathetic spin, giving her a solid reason to be doing what she is, but you effectively flex your stealth skills to dodge her superpowered laser beam by hiding behind objects, until you get close enough to her to land a hit. Calling it a boss fight wouldn't be accurate because it's more of a boss obliterating, since you just run up to her and one-tap her so hard she ragdolls through a stone chair like a complete rube. The only real flaws I noticed with the game are that sometimes the avatar for the NPC you're talking to doesn't actually appear. Most of the time you get an image of who you're talking to and yourself, but sometimes it just didn't spawn in. There are minor typos, but it's a Spanish game, so I can let them off. And the game doesn't seem entirely sure whether or not you should be detectable in the spirit realm. There's a part with a guard that you need to get past outside a house, and if he spots you, he boots you out. Kudos to the programming, the guard NPCs in this game are actually pretty well done, because not only do they have visibility in their torch beam, but they are not completely blind and deaf outside of that. They will move to you if they could reasonably hear your footsteps, or if you're behind them but get too close, they have proximity detection. I got stuck trying to get past him for a while, but I tried going into the spirit realm to sneak by and he just caught me every time. Yet, in the bar, I had to sneak past the bartender to get something out of a back room, and if I was normal, he would spot me and tell me to get out. But if I went into the spirit world, I could just walk straight in. It's weird because usually when you go spirit realming, the standard NPCs fade out of existence, but for the stealth puzzles in the building too, nothing despawns. Are these guards partly dead too? Is this what happens when you're alive but dead inside? It's a nicely designed game, though the characters aren't the prettiest things in the world, with some real soulless eyes knocking around, and several repeated character models for the NPCs, but it's all stylised to the low poly graphics, and the environment design and detail is really nice, with bits of broken town, dangling bridge, running rivers, and flower petals or pollen floating through the air. The features of the environment interact with you at least partly, with wafting grass and bushes, and you can give yourself a shower at the hospital or a blood shower at the ritual spot, whatever you fancy. The effects for switching realms and the colour changes are done well, the effects on your hat are good and interactable stuff is well defined. There is music but it's very quiet, which is alright since you don't really focus on it for too much of it, but when you do tune in it fits the environment and is nice to listen to. From what I saw too, it's a pretty stable game, it works how it's meant to. If you reload or continue a save halfway through an investigation, it does reset some of the puzzles that you've done, but you get to keep your items that you have in your inventory, so it's not really something that can break any of the puzzles. You can just do them again to get where you need to go. If you quit in a certain area, it doesn't matter. Continuing the game will always respawn you from the first place you would spawn in that segment. So in the first part it's the hospital, and in the second it's the Witch's Tower. I didn't experience any bugs in the combat segment, it's very basic mechanics to fight with, which is fine, it doesn't need much more than that really. Story-wise, if you don't want to run around and talk to everything, then all the core elements will be explained to you anyway via the trials and the cutscenes. But to understand people's motives and give context to what might be happening, there's a lot within conversations with the random townsfolk, with things even like the lore behind the rich family of the town whose house you do need to go into, but you can find out a bit of their ancestry and speak to a member of the household who skips his mother's birthday party. The characters are written well to have their own personality, or the key ones are anyway, and there are no blindingly evil people in the story. Everyone has their reason to do things, including the final boss witch, and with the way the world is designed and how it's all written, it's an easy story and world to get invested in. It has its humour in there, not a ton, but there are bits and pieces, which overall make it a pretty enjoyable game. The puzzle solutions make sense, and the culprits are pretty easy to figure out considering the first trial scene shows you one of them, the first level shows you another, and the end of the first level reveals the third one. They don't care about stringing you along, just 'cause, you still have to find the proof. It's a short game when you can figure stuff out. I got a little stuck for a bit, as I said, but if you were to replay, it would likely be very short given you realising you can skip most of the conversations, and you know where and how to get everything. I experienced that doing a second run, given I forgot to turn on my screen recorder for a fair segment of my first run, so yay me. Replayability is fairly low, but I would recommend trying it for a bit of short fun, so I'll give Burn Me Twice a 7 out of 10.